Back then, I was just a 16-year-old orphan with nowhere to go after my parents died in a car crash, and the vultures that called themselves my relatives swooped in to snatch up every penny of the inheritance meant for me before tossing me out like garbage. I had no one left until Grandma Carter showed up like a miracle. She was my mom's childhood best friend and the only person who didn't hesitate to take me in, not out of pity, but because she believed in debts that transcended bloodlines. That's how I became the adopted son of the Carter family, and also how I ended up under the same roof as Emily Carter Portville's beloved socialite and ice queen. She hated me on sight, said I reminded her of everything she didn't want in a brother, messy, clingy, unwanted. And I didn't blame her, honestly. I tiptoed around her in our shared house, knowing full well I was the outsider. But fate has a way of screwing with people, especially when Grandma Carter was diagnosed with cancer and begged for one last thing before she died. She wanted to see Emily married and settled, and for some reason, she thought I was the guy to do it. Emily had just broken up with her longtime boyfriend Ryan Brooks, and she was so pissed off she grabbed my hand at Grandma's bedside and said, "Fine, I'll marry Ethan." And just like that, a wedding was thrown together in 2 weeks, all smiles and tears, and right after we signed the papers, she handed me a prenup and said with that signature deadpan look of hers, "This is just for Grandma. We're getting divorced in 7 years. No questions about personal lives. You live yours, I live mine." I agreed without hesitation. At that time, I owed everything to Grandma Carter, and I had no plans to get in Emily's way. She still had Ryan in her heart, and I still had. Well, no one, but I had pride. And so began our strange little marriage, quiet and mechanical. I worked 2 jobs and kept to myself, and she buried herself in Carter Media and Investments. Everything was chill until Ryan suddenly announced his marriage and baby abroad less than a year later. That broke her. She locked herself in her room for 5 days straight, crying and drinking like I'd never seen before. I didn't comfort her, didn't speak, just left her food and water like clockwork. On the 5th day, she opened the door, her eyes swollen, and held my hand with a fragile smile. "Ethan," she said, "let's live a real life from now on." And like a fool, I believed her. I started thinking maybe this could actually work. Maybe it wasn't just a contract anymore. Grandma was fading fast, and I wanted to give her a great-grandchild before she passed. So I poured myself into making our marriage real. And to be fair, so did Emily. She stayed by my side during my worst days, turned down major campaigns just to care for me when I was hospitalized with pneumonia. We became something that resembled a real couple, something more than contractual roommates. One night, 6 years in, I looked her in the eyes and told her, "I think I've fallen in love with you." "What about you?" She didn't answer. Just stared at me like I'd said something illegal. I was about to get up and leave, heart in pieces, but then she pulled me down, kissed me, and said, "I didn't dare admit it. But me too." We crossed that line that night, and from then on, it wasn't fake anymore. It was messy and warm and real. We made plans. We laughed. We dreamed. We became husband and wife in every sense of the word. I even shoved the divorce agreement to the back of the study drawer, covered in dust, forgotten. But of course, perfect peace never lasts. Right at the 7-year mark, guess who came crawling back from Europe? Ryan Brooks. Divorced. Claimed he left his kid with his ex and was planning to live quietly back in Portville. Except quiet wasn't in his vocabulary. The man started calling Emily every day. At first, she ignored him. Even tossed her phone at me once and said, "See? I'm done with that part of my life." But Ryan wasn't the type to take no for an answer. He started showing up at her office, hanging outside the building like a lovesick ghost until one day, she walked out with him. Hand in hand. In public. I confronted her, and she fed me some nonsense about PR, reputation management, and not wanting rumors to affect me. Yeah, right. Because the best way to protect your husband is to walk around with your ex. That was the beginning of the end. Ryan always had a new excuse to call her. His power went out, he got lost in the middle of the night, his leg hurt, his cat ran away. And every single time, Emily dropped everything and ran to him. Even on our 7th wedding anniversary. Even after I cleared my work schedule for the first time in forever to take her on a vacation she said she wanted. Even after we were already at the airport, boarding pass in hand. Her phone rang. She answered. He cried. She left. No goodbye. No apology. Just a suitcase in my hand and silence. That was the final nail. I went home, dug through the drawer, pulled out that old divorce agreement, wiped off the dust and stared at my own handwriting like it belonged to someone else. The agreement was laughably simple, everything split 50-50, no messy battles. I signed it without hesitation. If I wasn't enough to make her stay after everything, I wouldn't be the one to beg. I waited all night in the living room, the agreement on the table like a silent witness. At 3 a.m., she finally came home, reeking of alcohol and guilt. She walked in like nothing happened, like I'd just stayed up waiting for a hug. Then she saw the agreement. Her face went pale. "Ethan. You're being dramatic," she said. "I only went to check on Ryan. That's not worth a divorce." I didn't raise my voice. I just looked at her and said, 7 years are up. Let's stick to our original deal. That hit her. She got mad, defensive, but I didn't flinch. She threatened to walk out. I told her I'd see her at the county clerk's office at 9:30 a.m. And I meant it. But of course, nothing with Emily ever went that simply, and what happened next at the clerk's office would push everything over the edge. I showed up early the next morning at the county clerk's office, standing by the entrance with that divorce agreement tucked neatly inside a folder, like some cruel joke with my name on it, waiting to be finalized. At exactly 9:30, just as we agreed, Emily Carter walked up the courthouse steps in heels like nothing was wrong, a faint scent of last night's whiskey still clinging to her coat, and this look in her eyes, half sarcasm, half sadness. "Wow," she smirked, "you couldn't wait to get rid of me, huh?" I didn't bite. I pointed at the door and said, "Let's go. It'll be better for both of us." But just as we were about to step through the threshold and sign the end of our story, her phone rang. I could tell from the first buzz who it was, and so could she. She didn't even hesitate. Answered it like muscle memory. Then I heard it crying, panicked voice on the other end, "Emily, I fell from the stairs. I think I broke my leg. It hurts so bad. Please, can you take me to the hospital?" My jaw clenched. Her eyes widened with worry, and without a second thought, she spun around and started speed walking away, pulling her car keys out of her bag. In her rush, they clattered to the sidewalk, and she knelt to pick them up like nothing else mattered. I blocked her path, desperate one last time. "We're already here. Just 5 more minutes. Let's get the divorce first." She stopped and stared at me like I was the most heartless man on earth. "Ethan, do you even have a heart? Ryan broke his leg. He's in pain. How is that less important than a piece of paper?" That was the moment it all snapped. "What the hell does his broken leg have to do with me?" I asked, trying to keep my voice from shaking. "You're not a doctor. Call 911. That would be faster than driving across town." But Noyeri's still choosing him over me. Even now. Especially now. She scoffed, tone dripping with sarcasm. "Don't worry. I'm not trying to stall. I'll divorce you. But unlike you, I'm not cold-blooded. Ryan's vulnerable, and I'm going to be there for him." Then she pushed past me, got in her car, and drove away. I stood there like an idiot in front of the damn county clerk's office, folder still in my hand, watching the woman I'd spent 7 years loving disappear again for the same man. I told myself it didn't matter, that we'd file Monday. I told myself I wouldn't owe the Carter family anything anymore. But I forgot it was Saturday. The office wouldn't reopen until Monday, which meant I had to sit with that ache in my chest for 2 more days. I went home and started packing my stuff. No use staying in that house another night. I was halfway through folding up the life I'd built when Linda Carter, Emily's mom, called. She didn't like me. Never had. To her, I'd always been the orphan boy who came with no money, no connections, and no pedigree. But credit where it's due, she did take care of me after adopting me, and she never truly mistreated me either. So I picked up. "Ethan," she barked, "you and Emily come back to the Carter estate this afternoon. I've got something to say." Her tone didn't leave room for negotiation. I knew damn well Emily wasn't going to answer her calls right now. Hell, she was probably still hovering over Ryan in the ER, so I covered for her like I always had. "She's been swamped with work lately," I said. That didn't fly. "She runs her own company, don't tell me she's too busy to see her own mother on a weekend." "If you won't call her, I will." Then she hung up. Classic Linda. She always made things happen whether you liked it or not. And with her heart condition, nobody in the family dared stress her out too much. So I got in my car and drove to the Carter estate alone, bracing for another headache. When I got there, she launched into her favorite rant about grandkids. "You two have been married 7 years. What's taking so long? I want a grandson before I die." One of the maids whispered that Linda had tea with her socialite friends yesterday, and someone had brought their cute granddaughter along. Linda got jealous and now she was taking it out on us. I gave her the usual vague excuses: "Emily's busy, it takes time, we're not rushing." What I didn't say was that we'd never tried. The first year we were just pretending, and after that, contraception was deliberate. Even when things got real between us, we both silently agreed to delay it. But how could I explain that to someone like her? She sneered and muttered, "Some things you have to force. You never know what'll happen if you just try." Then, to prove her point, she called Emily herself. And after dialing more than 20 times, Emily finally picked up with a tired voice. "Mom, I'm busy. I'll call you tonight." "No," Linda snapped. "You're coming home for dinner, or I'm dragging your ass back myself." Emily agreed in silence. She knew better than to argue when her mom was in that mood. She showed up later that evening, hair messy like she'd rushed straight from Ryan's place. "Mom, I can only stay for dinner. I have something after." Her eyes darted toward mine, a hint of fear hiding in her expression. She thought I might spill everything right here in the Carter dining room. But I didn't. I kept quiet. Linda, however, had other plans. "You'll be sleeping on the 3rd floor for the weekend. I've already had it cleaned out. No excuses. I want a grandchild." Emily looked like she wanted to protest, but then Linda clutched her chest like she was about to pass out. Emily backed off instantly and nodded. I didn't argue either. After dinner, when we got to the guest room, I tossed a blanket onto the couch and made it clear I wasn't sleeping next to her. She stared at me, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Ethan, are you really going to keep giving me the cold shoulder? I know we started out as a contract marriage, but it's real now. It has been for years. I thought you felt the same." Her voice trembled, like she meant every word. For a second, I almost caved. But then her phone buzzed. She'd left it face up on the bed, and the screen lit up with a message from Ryan. "Thanks for taking me to the hospital today. I know that kiss was real." The world stopped spinning. Her eyes flicked to the message. Her whole body tensed. She flipped the phone over and scrambled to explain. He had a hairline fracture. He was scared. I was just trying to comfort him. I didn't mean, I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so damn pathetic. Don't bother explaining. I'm done listening. My voice was ice. Monday, we're getting that divorce. No more stalling. I'm done. Her face fell. You're really going through with it? She asked, like she couldn't believe I'd ever have the balls to walk away. I just feel bad for him. If any friend got hurt, I'd help them. Is that what you think this is? Friendship? I snapped. But before we could spiral deeper, Linda barged into the room holding a fruit tray, and with a fury I'd never seen, she slapped Emily across the face. Now I know why there's no grandchild. Ryan Brooks is back. She hated Ryan more than she hated me. Back in the day, he and Emily fought constantly, breaking up and getting back together like it was sport. When he stormed off to Europe, Emily was devastated. Linda never forgave him. You're a married woman. If you mess up your family for that loser, I swear I'll disown you. Emily tried to defend him. Ryan's not that bad, Mom. He's just misunderstood. That set Linda off. She started shaking, clutching her chest, gasping for breath. Mom. Emily screamed. Mom, what's wrong? Ethan, help me. Her heart get the meds. We rushed her to St. Augustine Medical. Hours passed. Surgery lights. 4 drips. Cold metal benches. Guilt hung in the air like smoke. Somewhere deep inside, I wanted to hold Emily and say it would be okay, but I didn't. I couldn't. Not after everything. Just past midnight, her phone rang again. She stepped away to answer. A few minutes later, she came back and whispered, Ryan's panicking. Something happened. I have to check on him. What about your mother? I asked, stunned. You're here. You'll watch her. She said it so casually, as if it was just another carpool switch. Then she was gone, disappearing down the hall like always. That was the moment I knew. She wouldn't change. No matter how many second chances I gave her. No matter how much history we had. I stayed with Linda through the night, eyes wide open, brain screaming. And that was just the beginning, because what came next would make everything before look like child's play. The next morning, I was still at the hospital, slouched in the uncomfortable chair beside Linda's bed, rubbing my temples and trying not to fall asleep as the fluorescent lights kept humming above me like a taunt, when the sliding doors down the hallway opened and enrolled the last person I ever wanted to see, Ryan Brooks, sitting in a wheelchair, looking smug despite the leg brace wrapped around his knee, and next to him, one of the nurses was wheeling him in like he owned the place. I should have ignored him. I should have just stayed in the room and kept pretending I hadn't seen the disaster coming a mile away. But he saw me first, waved, and grinned like we were college buddies catching up over brunch. Ethan, what a surprise. What brings you here visiting Emily? He asked, oozing fake sincerity. My fists clenched before my brain could stop them, and for once in my life, I let instinct take over. I walked right across that lobby floor, the polished tiles echoing every step, and without hesitation, I slapped the smugness off his face. The sound cracked across the hospital like a firework, and every head in the room turned in perfect synchronization. Ryan froze, one hand on his cheek, eyes wide in disbelief. What the hell? I've seen a lot of shameless people, I said loudly, letting the entire damn floor hear me, but you take the crown, Brooks. Acting like some pitiful little victim while cozying up to another man's wife. You proud of that? Whispers rippled through the bystanders. Ryan stammered, trying to save face, but he was clearly rattled. And then, like clockwork, Emily came rushing from down the corridor, clearly having heard the commotion. She darted between us and shoved me back. Ethan. What the hell is wrong with you? If you're angry, take it out on men at him. He's injured. Oh, so you suddenly care now? I shot back. You care when I hit him, but not when he ruins our entire marriage. Interesting. Without giving her time to spin more lies, I turned and walked off, but she grabbed my wrist. Ethan, stop it. You're being irrational. This isn't you. I yanked my arm free, looked her straight in the eye, and said, "No, Emily. This is exactly me. The version that's done pretending, done forgiving, and finally sees the truth." Just then, Linda showed up from the elevator, still in her hospital gown, her face pale but her eyes blazing with fury. She took one look at the scene: Ryan sitting like a stunned deer, Emily shielding him, me standing rigid and cold, and she slapped Emily so hard I heard the crack of it echo off the walls. "I knew something was wrong with you the moment I found out Ryan was back," she hissed. "I should have trusted my gut. You're a married woman, Emily. And this? This is what you've chosen to throw your family away for?" Emily staggered from the force of it, hand to her cheek, eyes wide with disbelief. "Mom! You can't just—" "Oh, I can," Linda snapped. "And I will. If I could beat some sense into you, maybe you'd finally realize what an embarrassment you've become." But Emily, stubborn as ever, refused to back down. "Ryan's not like that, Mom. He's not the bad guy you keep saying he is." That's when Linda started shaking again, clenching her chest, and we all panicked for a second before a nurse came sprinting over to help. Emily froze, clearly torn, but still looked like she wanted to run to Ryan first. I saw it in her eyes. Even with her mother collapsing in front of her, she was still wondering how Ryan felt. I couldn't believe it. Not anymore. I just couldn't. And then, because the universe has a twisted sense of humor, Ryan's phone rang. He picked it up, whispered something into the receiver, and then looked at Emily with wide, fake concerned eyes. My kid's here," he said, like it was no big deal. And just like that, a little boy no older than 6 came barreling into the hallway, wrapped his arms around Ryan's leg brace, and cried, "Daddy! I finally found you." Every jaw in the room dropped, including Emily's. The kid didn't stop there. "Mom says even though she lost her job and we're not rich anymore, we'll work hard so you don't leave again. Please don't go, Daddy." Emily looked like someone had sucker punched her soul. Her lips trembled as she stepped back, her eyes bouncing between Ryan and the kid. "You have a child," she whispered. "You never told me." "It's not like that," Ryan blurted, eyes darting. "He's from my past. I didn't want to burden you, didn't want to burden me." Emily cut in, voice rising. "You mean you lied to me? Again?" The kid's words kept coming, oblivious to the chaos he'd sparked. "Daddy, why did you leave? Mommy said you had to work, but now you're here with another pretty lady." Linda let out a sarcastic laugh. "Still think he's not the bad guy, sweetheart?" Emily looked at me, her face pale, like reality was crashing down on her all at once. But I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Everything she needed to know was playing out right in front of her. Then, as if we were all part of some twisted sitcom, Ryan's wife stormed into the lobby. Not ex-wife. Not ex-anything. His actual, legal, still married wife. She looked like a storm in heels, threw her purse at Ryan, and screamed, "So this is where you've been hiding? With your little side fling while I'm raising our son alone?" The room exploded. Security guards tried to separate people. The nurse nearly dropped a tray. Linda rolled her eyes and muttered, "Unbelievable." Emily backed away slowly, like her entire spine had disintegrated. Ryan tried to chase after her, yelling apologies, but tripped over his own brace and fell flat on his face. I didn't even flinch. I walked out of the hospital that day with a calm I hadn't felt in years. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel jealous. I felt done. Utterly, beautifully done. For the next 2 days, Emily didn't call, didn't text, didn't come home. She'd been detained for getting into a brawl with Ryan's wife in the hospital lobby. Shocking, right? By Wednesday, she was released. I sent her a message. Short and cold. Meet me at the county clerk's office at noon. We're finishing this. She called me instead. Her voice was quiet. Ethan, I know I've been wrong. I let Ryan back in too easily. I never meant to hurt you like this. Can we just go back to before? I let out a hollow laugh. You knew exactly what you were doing. You knew it would break me, and you did it anyway. That's not a mistake, Emily. That's a choice. There was silence on the line, and then, suddenly, a crash. Screeching tires. A loud thud. Then nothing. My stomach dropped. 10 minutes later, I got a call from Portville PD. Emily had crashed her car into a tree just outside the hospital. She survived, but her leg was messed up pretty bad. I raced over, breath stuck in my throat, part of me still instinctively worried, even after everything. When I got there, I stood outside her hospital room, listening to her conversation with Linda. You deliberately crashed into a damn tree? Linda was screaming. What the hell is wrong with you? You wanna die, do it after you give me a grandkid at least. Emily sniffled. I just wanted to test him. If Ethan saw I was hurt, maybe he'd feel something. Maybe he wouldn't go through with the divorce. My heart didn't just break. It shattered and then burned. I walked in, stared at her bandaged leg, then at her face, then said flatly, "Congratulations. You've officially disgusted me." Her eyes went wide. Wait, Ethan, please. It wasn't supposed to be serious. I just wanted you to what? I snapped. Pity you. Stay because you limped into court instead of walking. What do you think this is, a damn romance novel? She tried to grab my hand, but I pulled away. We're going now. You want sympathy? Get it from your ex. I'm not that guy anymore. I ordered a wheelchair, hired a nurse to lift her into it, and pushed her down the hallway myself, ignoring every protest and tear. And as the county clerk's office finally came into view, I realized something deep in my bones: this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of freedom. I pushed Emily through the doors of the county clerk's office in a wheelchair she didn't deserve, her left leg bandaged and elevated like it was some grand sacrifice when in reality it was just the latest in a string of manipulative stunts that only made everything worse, and as I rolled her up to the front desk and handed the clerk our documents, she looked up at me with these watery eyes like she was the victim in this whole story, like I was the cruel one for not buying into her carefully constructed tragedy, and honestly, if I hadn't lived through every miserable second of these past 7 years, I might have fallen for it too, because on the surface, Emily Carter was flawless, elegant, poised, the kind of woman who could make any man believe she was his salvation. But I knew better now. I knew what lived beneath that pretty face, and when the clerk called us forward and handed us the final set of divorce certificates to sign, I didn't even blink. I picked up the pen and signed my name in one smooth motion like I was writing my way out of a prison sentence, while beside me, Emily hesitated, her fingers trembling, her eyes scanning my face for any trace of hesitation, but there was none, not anymore, and when she finally scribbled her name down, the air between us turned cold, quiet, final, and we both stared at the pair of papers that marked the end of our 7-year contract turned marriage like they were tombstones on a grave neither of us wanted to visit again, until she suddenly turned to me and whispered, "Now that we're divorced, can I chase you again?" And I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so tragically her, trying to reclaim what she herself had burned to ashes. So I didn't respond, didn't offer sympathy or closure, just turned away and walked out into the sunlight with the divorce certificate in my hand and a weight off my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying for years. And when I stepped out of that government building into the wide open street where the breeze felt just a little warmer and the air didn't taste like guilt, I understood for the first time what freedom really felt like, because for all the years I spent trying to build something with Emily, all I ever did was survive her coldness, her absence, her blind loyalty to a man who would abandon his wife and kid the moment things got hard, and yet I stayed, year after year, hoping I'd be enough for her to choose me, hoping she'd eventually see me not as the orphan her family adopted out of obligation but as the man who stood by her when everyone else ran. But in the end, she didn't choose me, not once, not when it mattered, not even when I was the one giving her everything, and maybe I was stupid for holding on that long, maybe I was weak for loving her past the point of reason, but if these last few days taught me anything, it's that love without respect isn't love at all, and now I was done being the fool who waited in the shadows. So I took that clean break and ran with it, packed up my things from the Carter estate without a word, called a moving service, and left nothing behind but a note for Linda that said thank you for everything but please don't interfere anymore, because I'm not coming back, not to that house, not to that life, not to her daughter, and I moved into my own apartment downtown, nothing fancy, just a small high-rise overlooking the bay with floor-to-ceiling windows and silence I didn't have to share with anyone, and I started living again, waking up without anxiety, cooking for myself, working without distractions, answering only to me, and for a while, it was good, quiet, clean, peaceful, but of course peace never lasts when your past refuses to stay buried, and it didn't take long before Emily showed up again, hobbling into my building lobby like a storm in heels with her cast freshly removed and a bouquet of apology roses in hand, standing there with that same soft gaze she used to give me when she wanted something, asking if we could talk, just talk, no pressure, no manipulation, and I was dumb enough to agree, just for 5 minutes, just to shut the door on whatever this was once and for all. So I let her into my apartment, watched her take it all in, the clean counters, the open space, the lack of her perfume, and she sat down across from me, wringing her hands like she hadn't just shattered my heart weeks ago, and said, "Ethan, I know you hate me, and you have every right to, but I need you to know something. I didn't mean for any of it to happen." I was confused. I thought Ryan needed me, and I thought you'd always be there, no matter what, and I stared at her for a long time, wondering how someone could say something so selfish and still expect redemption, and maybe once upon a time I would have given her a second chance, maybe if she'd come to me before everything fell apart, before Ryan's child showed up and called him Daddy in front of a room full of strangers, maybe then I'd still believe her, but not now, not after everything. So I told her the truth, plain and direct, "Emily, I don't hate you, I'm done with you," and that sentence must have hit harder than anything else I'd said, because her whole face collapsed, like she finally understood that some lines, once crossed, can't be uncrossed, and she stood up to leave, but before she reached the door, she turned back one last time and asked, "Is there really no chance we could ever find our way back?" And I said no, not because I wanted to hurt her, but because I meant it, because you can't rebuild trust on the ruins of betrayal. And as the door clicked shut behind her, I felt no sadness, no anger, just clarity, and maybe that's what healing actually looks like, not some dramatic moment of forgiveness or grand closure, just the quiet understanding that you're finally free from something that never loved you right, and from that day forward, I promised myself I'd never settle for half-hearted again. I'd never waste my loyalty on someone who treated it like an inconvenience, and I'd never again wait at an airport gate for a woman who was always planning to walk away. Life after the divorce didn't get easier overnight, but it got quieter, and for a man like me who'd spent years walking on emotional landmines just to keep the peace, that silence was golden, and I didn't realize how much of myself I had buried beneath Emily's expectations, beneath the cold war that had become our marriage, until I started waking up without the weight of wondering if she'd choose me that day or disappear the moment her ex called, and every morning in my new apartment felt like opening a window that had been nailed shut for years. Even the way sunlight spilled into the kitchen seemed different, like I was finally allowed to take up space in my own life again, and at first, I didn't do anything drastic. I didn't change my hair or buy a motorcycle or run off to some remote island like those cliché movie breakups. I just went back to being someone I hadn't been in a long time, a man with plans, with peace, with his own damn opinions, and it felt good to reclaim things I didn't even realize I'd lost, like the freedom to eat dinner when I wanted without waiting for someone who always came home late, the freedom to stop pretending everything was fine when it wasn't, the freedom to choose myself every day without guilt. And while the world kept spinning, the gossip faded fast, because let's be real, people have short attention spans. And a Carter family scandal was only juicy for about 2 trending cycles before someone else's drama took center stage, and though Emily's name had been in the headlines for a few days thanks to the hospital incident with Ryan's wife and the viral video of their hallway catfight, it eventually disappeared just like she did from my world, and I focused on rebuilding, on working overtime to grow my consulting firm, on calling my few real friends back, on showing up for people who actually showed up for me, and that's how I reconnected with Jessica Harper, someone I hadn't seen since college, someone who used to sit 2 rows behind me in that boring economics class and roll her eyes whenever the professor got too excited about interest rates, and it started off casual, bumped into her at a client mixer, grabbed coffee out of politeness, realized it didn't feel awkward, and by the 3rd meetup, we were laughing like old times, talking about books and bad TV, about how life derails in your 20s and how no one warns you that love sometimes looks more like survival than joy, and there was no pressure, no drama, just this easy rhythm between us that I hadn't felt in years, but I didn't rush it, didn't force it, because I knew better now. Real connection doesn't need to be chased or fixed, it just shows up and stays, and even though I was cautious, I wasn't cold, and for the first time since the beginning of everything with Emily, I felt okay just being seen, not as a placeholder, not as an obligation, but as someone worth listening to. And that would have been enough, just living my life, slowly healing, if Emily hadn't come back again like some ghost who didn't know how to stay dead, and it happened on a Friday, right after I closed a big deal and was on my way home from a dinner with investors, when I saw her standing outside my apartment building with that same damn look on her face, the one she used when she was about to twist the knife and act like I was the one being unreasonable. And she didn't say anything at first, just stood there with a folder in her hands and this tight smile like she was trying not to fall apart, and I should have walked past her, should have gone upstairs and locked the door and poured myself a glass of something strong, but I didn't, because closure's a funny thing, and even after everything, part of me still needed to hear what excuse she'd cooked up this time, so I nodded and let her follow me to the rooftop, the place I usually went to clear my head, and we stood there under the orange glow of the city skyline like 2 people from a different life, and she finally broke the silence, said, "This is the contract we signed 7 years ago, remember?" And she opened the folder to reveal a worn-out copy of our original agreement, with our signatures side by side, still crisp like they hadn't been the most ironic promise ever written, and she continued, "I've read it 100 times, trying to figure out where we went wrong, trying to understand how something that started as fake could feel so real and still fall apart," and I didn't interrupt her. Just let her talk, let her ramble through every self-justification she could muster, how she never stopped loving me, how she only ran to Ryan because she thought I didn't care, how she was scared when things started feeling too genuine because she didn't know what love without drama looked like, and maybe 5 years ago, that speech would have torn me to pieces, but now it just sounded like someone clinging to a version of the past that never really existed, and when she was done, when her voice cracked and her mascara started to smudge, I looked at her and said, "Emily, you didn't run to Ryan because you thought I didn't care, you ran because you knew I did. And you wanted to see how far you could push before I broke," and her face froze like I'd slapped her again, but this time the sting came from truth, not skin, and I added, "You said it felt real, and maybe for a while it did, but real love doesn't make you choose someone else in the middle of the night, it doesn't make you fake car accidents or beg for forgiveness only when you're caught, it doesn't disappear every time someone cries on the other end of the phone," and for once, she didn't argue, didn't yell or twist it back on me. She just stood there in silence, because she finally understood that there was no version of this where we went back, no alternate ending where I held her and said let's start over. Because I'd already started over without her, and I liked where I was, I liked who I was becoming, and maybe I wasn't perfect, maybe I still had scars and quiet mornings where my chest felt too tight, but I didn't belong to her anymore, and that realization was more freeing than any signed paper or final goodbye, and after a few more seconds of unbearable silence, she said softly, "So that's it then," and I nodded, not cruelly, not bitterly, just firmly, "Yeah, that's it," and she walked away without another word, her heels clicking down the stairs like the last beat of a song that had already ended. And I stayed on that rooftop for a long time, watching the city lights blink like a quiet applause, knowing that even if I hadn't found my next chapter yet, at least I wasn't stuck rereading the old one, and that night, as I lay in bed with the window cracked open and the breeze brushing against my face, I smiled not because I had everything figured out, but because for once, I wasn't afraid to be alone. And I knew exactly what I wouldn't settle for ever again. After that rooftop conversation, something shifted for good, not just between Emily and me, but inside me, like a door that had been half cracked open for years had finally slammed shut, and not with rage or some cinematic drama, but with quiet finality, like the kind that comes when you realize you've outgrown something you once thought you couldn't live without. And I didn't feel victorious or even particularly proud, I just felt still, like the chaos that had filled my life for so long had finally stopped spinning, and I could finally hear myself think without her voice in my head, second-guessing every thought, every feeling, every decision I made. And I know people like to say that time heals everything, but honestly, it wasn't time that healed, might was truth. And once I stopped lying to myself about what our marriage was, once I stopped clinging to this fantasy that love was supposed to be earned through suffering, I realized how badly I'd abandoned myself all those years, how many chances I gave someone who never really saw me. And it wasn't about blame anymore, it wasn't even about forgiveness, it was just about standing up for the version of me who spent years quietly waiting for scraps and finally learning he didn't deserve that. And yeah, I'd be lying if I said I didn't still feel a pang every now and then when I heard her name mentioned in passing, or when I caught a glimpse of that particular brand of perfume she used to wear drifting by on someone else. But those moments didn't sting like they used to, they didn't drag me under, because now they were just background noise in a life that no longer revolved around her. And in the weeks that followed our final goodbye, Emily did what she always did, vanished for a while, then resurfaced in subtle ways, liking old photos on social media, bumping into mutual friends and leaving vague comments about missing what we had. But I didn't respond, not because I wanted to punish her, but because silence was the only answer left that made sense, because I'd said everything I needed to say, and anything more would just be dragging ghosts into a future that finally had space for something new. And as for Ryan Brooks, well, word on the street was that his wife took full custody and moved back east, took the kid and the money and left him in the dust. And from what I heard, he tried to contact Emily again, tried to play the same "I'm broken and need saving" game, but she didn't answer. Maybe because she finally learned her lesson, or maybe because she had no one left to impress. I didn't really care either way, because by then, I had stopped making space in my life for old stories with no new chapters. And the funny thing is, the more distance I put between me and the past, the more clearly I saw how much of my life had been paused, not just emotionally but professionally, like I'd spent so much energy holding up a crumbling marriage that I hadn't realized how much potential I'd left untouched. And once I got that dead weight off my shoulders, everything started accelerating. Me firm doubled in size, I landed 3 major contracts back to back, and for the first time since college, I felt like I was building something that actually mattered to me, not to anyone else, not to Emily or her family or the version of myself that only existed in their approval, but something mine, something rooted. And yeah, Jessica was still in the picture, not in some whirlwind romance kind of way, but in a real, grown-up, you bring peace to my chaos kind of way. And we took things slow, not because we were afraid, but because we respected each other enough not to rush what didn't need rushing. And she never asked me to be more than I was, never demanded I explain scars I wasn't ready to reopen, just sat with me in the quiet when I needed it and challenged me when I got stuck in old habits. And one night, as we were walking home from a late dinner, she stopped mid-step, looked at me under the glow of the street lamp, and said, "I like this version of you." And I smiled because for the first time in years, I liked him too. And maybe that's the real ending people like me need, not the reunion or the revenge or the perfectly timed redemption arc, but the rediscovery, the slow, steady, almost boring process of becoming whole again, of not needing anyone else's permission to be proud of your own damn survival. And maybe if you'd asked me 5 years ago what I thought healing looked like, I would have said it was about winning her back or proving her wrong. But now I know it's just waking up every morning and not having to lie to yourself anymore. And yeah, I heard Emily got back into therapy, that she's trying to fix things with her mother, that she's keeping a low profile and avoiding media attention. And part of me hopes that's true, not because I want her back, but because no one deserves to stay broken forever. And despite everything, I don't wish pain on her, I just don't want to be the one bleeding for her anymore. And I guess that's what happens when you finally cut the last thread tying you to someone who didn't know how to hold you. You stop bleeding, you start breathing, and then one day, without even noticing it, you start smiling for no reason again. And that's where I am now, sitting on my balcony, watching the sun rise over Portville, a cup of strong coffee in one hand and the wind brushing against my skin like it's trying to remind me that I'm still here, still standing, still healing, and maybe I'll fall in love again someday, maybe I won't, but I'll never again settle for being someone's afterthought, never again make a home out of someone who only ever gave me a hotel room, because I've finally learned how to be my own anchor, and that's more than I ever thought I'd get out of this story. So if you're reading this and wondering when it gets better, when the pain stops echoing, and the guilt stops chasing you down alleys in the middle of the night, just know that it does not all at once, not with fireworks or closure speeches, but with the quiet decision to choose yourself every single day, even when it's hard, even when it's lonely, even when the world tells you to forgive before you're ready, and someday, you'll walk out of your own version of the county clerk's office, holding your own version of a fresh start, and you'll look up at the sky and think, this is what freedom tastes like, and you'll be right, because it is, and you earned it.